The boy had no bruises, just one, and it spoke volumes. They said the boy was fine, that he had family, that everything was legal. But when Connor saw the way the German shepherd named Asher positioned himself between the boy and the woman, quiet, unmoving, he knew better. And when the boy adjusted his sleeve and Connor glimpsed it, a single mark, the kind left behind by a restraint or tight grip, he felt it deep in his gut. This wasn't guardianship. This was captivity. What started as a routine welfare check turned into something far more chilling. A woman with too many names, a child with too many identities, and a dog with instincts so sharp he sensed the danger long before anyone else could name it. This story isn't easy. It involves secrets buried behind suburban smiles, and the kind of manipulation that leaves no fingerprints. But it's also about a bond stronger than fear between a silent boy and the dog who became his voice. And by the end, when the boy finally runs, he doesn't run alone. Dry Hollow wasn't on most maps anymore, just a thread of faded streets and sunburned mailboxes clinging to the desert edges of West Texas. The kind of place where the wind remembered more than the people did. Connor Briggs walked with the slow, quiet rhythm of someone who had once marched in cadence, but no longer needed orders. At 39, he moved like a man older than that, not from age, but from the weight of what had once sat on his shoulders. The desert sun hung low behind him, casting long, amber shadows across the cracked sidewalk. Beside him, Asher, a sable-coated German shepherd, kept perfect step. The street was lined with duplexes that had once housed soldiers and their families. Now their paint peeled in long, curling strips. Blinds stayed closed, even in the daylight. Grass was more memory than presence. A rusted swing set creaked in a backyard 2 houses down, moving, though no child had touched it in years. The place felt like a photograph left out in the sun, colors faded, edges curled, stories almost erased. Connor didn't speak. He rarely did, unless it was to Asher, and even then, the words came like rationed water, just enough to survive, never more than necessary. He wore the same weathered jacket every morning, desert tan with a Marine Corps patch half ripped on the left arm, not because he cared much about symbols anymore, but because the lining was soft and it kept the wind from biting through old injuries. His right knee gave him trouble, especially on cooler mornings like this one. It had taken shrapnel near Marja, and though the VA had patched the bone and tendon, something in the joint still whispered every time his foot. McClellan Avenue, then past the old barracks-turned apartments near the community center. Locals didn't bother them. A few nodded from porches, most didn't. Connor wasn't unfriendly, just elsewhere. People sensed it. The kind of distance that didn't come from arrogance, but from carrying things that had no name in small talk. Asher, on the other hand, had the quiet charisma of a dog who had once been trained for danger but now lived for routine. His coat shimmered dark down the spine, fading to ash and soft brown toward the legs. His ears stayed high, twitching at every unexpected sound, but his tail swayed slowly, low, relaxed. A dog at peace with duty, but never off-duty. Connor paused in front of a small convenience store, with windows so dusty the sunlight turned to gauze when it came through. He tied Asher's leash to the bike rack out front. No one used it, but he did. Always the same way, 2 loops, 1 knot. Muscle memory, unshakable. Inside, he grabbed a black coffee. No sugar, no cream. He didn't even wait for it to cool. Back outside, Asher sat quietly, eyes tracking him even before the door opened. The moment Connor stepped onto the sidewalk, the dogs stood. No command needed. They kept walking. A breeze cut across the lot, lifting dust into lazy spirals. Connor narrowed his eyes against the glare. He scanned rooftops as they walked, a habit he couldn't shake. Every edge, every alley, every window was noted. Not in panic, just quietly filed away. The way a soldier who had once survived roadside ambushes couldn't help but check the undersides of cars. Even in peace, the past didn't forget him. As they turned onto Fifth, Connor sipped his coffee and let the heat settle into his chest. It grounded him, anchored him to something real. For a moment, everything was just as it had been the day before, and the day before that. Quiet, predictable, bearable. Until tomorrow, when it wouldn't be. But for now, Dry Hollow breathed in the silence of another ordinary morning. The sky above was pale, washed-out blue with a halo of thin cirrus clouds. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then fell silent again. A woman hung laundry 2 houses over. A pickup rattled down the street, music leaking from a half-rolled window. Life, such as it was, carried on. Connor and Asher made their final turn down the alley behind Jefferson Court, a run-down cluster of duplexes that had once been officer housing. Weeds split the concrete in jagged seams. Fences sagged like tired shoulders. A broken tricycle sat half-buried in dust near a chain-link gate. Asher slowed. His ears twitched, nose testing the wind. Connor didn't say a word. He just tightened his grip on the coffee cup and waited. A quiet not yet, but something was coming. They just didn't know it yet. The air shifted. It was subtle, the kind of change that didn't come with thunder or sudden light, but with a quiet tightening, a stillness under the surface. Connor felt it first in the way Asher's gait slowed. 1 second they were walking the familiar path along Carson Avenue, cracked concrete, rusted fences, shadows stretching long in the afternoon sun, and the next the dog's entire frame tensed like a coiled wire, ears high, nose twitching, tail stiff, not wagging. Connor stopped. The leash went taut in his hand, but Asher didn't pull. He stood, muscles carved in stone, locked on something across the street. It wasn't a squirrel, not a cat. This wasn't curiosity. This was instinct, trained, tested, and never wrong. Connor followed his line of sight. A woman, maybe early 40s, moving fast, but trying not to look like it. Blonde hair tied back tight into a bun that barely moved as she walked. A sage-green trench coat wrapped snug around her like armor. One hand clutched a tote bag. The other gripped the wrist of a small boy walking beside her. Connor barely registered her at first. He had seen people like her before, brisk, contained, private. What stopped him cold was the boy. 6, maybe 7, thin. Shoulders hunched like someone who had learned to take up less space. His sweatshirt hung off him like it had been borrowed, sleeves swallowing his hands. He didn't speak, didn't skip, just walked, feet close together, head low. And then, for just a heartbeat, he looked up. Connor didn't blink. The boy's eyes were too large for his face, gray-blue, rimmed with shadows. And in that single glance, there was something Connor hadn't seen in years, not since his deployments, not since he'd pulled a little girl from a cellar in Helmand Province. That same silence behind the eyes, that same quiet scream no one else seemed to hear. Then the boy did something Connor hadn't expected. Behind the woman's back, he lifted his right hand, not to wave, not to block the sun. 3 fingers, palm inward. It lasted less than a second, quick, precise, then gone. The woman didn't notice. She kept moving, faster now, her steps tightening as they approached the far end of the block. Connor froze. The coffee cup in his hand suddenly felt heavy. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe, not from fear but recognition. That gesture wasn't random. It wasn't some kid being playful. It was a signal, a silent SOS taught in covert military briefings and survivor training. A gesture designed for victims who couldn't speak, abductees, hostages, children in danger. A message sent in the only way left, when words were dangerous. He'd seen it before, once, a young girl in a Syrian village, left behind when her family had vanished. She didn't speak a word, didn't cry, but when Connor knelt beside her and asked if she needed help, 3 fingers, palm inward, disappear before anyone else noticed. He'd never forgotten it. His breath shortened. He glanced at Asher. The dog was already watching the pair as they turned the corner near the chain-link fence bordering Jefferson Court. His body leaned forward slightly. A low sound rumbled in his throat. Not loud, not aggressive, but deliberate. A warning hum, deep in the chest. Connor hadn't heard that sound in a long time. Not since Asher had served beside him in patrols that rarely returned whole. And just like that, the sidewalk felt different. He scanned the street. No one else around, no cars, no distant laughter. The whole block had dropped into a hush, so complete it felt orchestrated. Asher moved first. 1 step forward. Connor held the leash firm, his other hand drifting instinctively toward his right hip where a sidearm used to rest. Nothing there now. Just the memory of metal and certainty. The boy and the woman disappeared from view. Connor's jaw clenched. His mind raced, mapping the direction, marking exits, scanning details most civilians wouldn't notice. The speed of her walk, the boy's gait, the way her hand never left his wrist. He didn't move for a full 10 seconds after they were gone. Asher stared at the corner like it still held something unfinished. Then Connor took a breath and whispered low, not to be heard, but to remember. That wasn't nothing. The wind kicked up dust along the gutter. A loose flyer from a telephone pole flapped once, then broke free, skittering down the street like a thing trying to flee. Asher's ears stayed sharp. The moment was over. But something had changed. Connor turned slowly, gaze still lingering on the spot where the boy had stood. He couldn't explain why, but the world around him had narrowed. Like everything outside that sidewalk had gone gray. He tugged gently on the leash. Asher followed, though his head turned back twice before they rounded the block. The afternoon sun warmed Connor's back, but he didn't feel it. His thoughts were elsewhere now. Not just on the boy, but on the deliberate precision of that 3-fingered plea. The way it had pierced the silence. The way it had somehow found him. They walked in silence. No more rustle of leaves, no creak of swings, only the soft pad of Asher's paws on pavement, and the sound of Connor's own heart settling into something heavier than before. Something had been set in motion. He didn't know what yet, but he knew one thing for sure. That child was in danger. And Asher had seen it too, where they'd started, a wide gravel lot behind the old armory building, long since converted into a discount furniture warehouse. The place was mostly empty now, save for a few delivery trucks and a line of crooked folding chairs left outside like someone had meant to pick them up but never did. Connor stopped near the rusted chain-link gate and sat down on a low concrete block, the kind used to mark off parking rows. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting everything in a long, burnt-orange hush. Asher sat in front of him, tail curled tight to his side, head tilted, alert, and still neither of them spoke. Connor's hand dropped to his knee, the bad one. The scar itched sometimes when the weather turned, but this time it wasn't the joint bothering him. It was something deeper, familiar, unwelcome, the boy's hand, 3 fingers, palm inward. The movement was too fast for an accident, too clean, too intentional. Connor closed his eyes. It was Kandahar, 2013. Training ops were thick that month. They'd just wrapped a simulated recovery mission out in the desert, working with a small team of interpreters and Afghan police officers. Dust coated everything: gear, skin, breath. One of the instructors had gathered them inside a briefing tent, the kind that always smelled faintly of canvas and diesel. "We're adding this to the signal protocol," he'd said, holding up his own hand. 3 fingers, palm in, close to the chest. Then gone. Connor remembered shifting in his seat, half listening until the words landed. "It's meant for hostages who can't speak. Victims under control. If you ever see this in a civilian zone, drop whatever you're doing and pay attention. It means, help me, quietly." He remembered practicing it with the others, repeating it so it lived in their muscle memory. Like a code burned in, invisible unless you knew how to read it. He hadn't seen the signal again for years, not until Syria, and not since then, until today. A low, throaty sound pulled him back. Asher. The growl wasn't loud. It rarely was. But it came from deep in the chest, more vibration than volume, the kind of sound a handler learned to respect, not fear. Connor looked up. The dog wasn't staring at anything in particular now, just the general direction of the neighborhood they'd left behind. His ears weren't pinned, but they were forward. Nose lifted slightly. Tense, but not aggressive. The message was clear. "We saw something we weren't supposed to." Connor ran a hand over his mouth. His fingers trembled a little. He let them. The quiet was gone. Not just the outer silence, the calm of their daily routine, the unchanging rhythm of walks and coffee and anonymous streets, but the silence inside him. Someone who needed help badly had taught him. Or someone who knew danger was always close. And worse, what kind of life makes a child remember it? He exhaled. The sound came out flat, dry. Asher stood, paced twice, then sat again. Connor didn't need words. The dog had already confirmed what he feared. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't paranoia. It was a message. And for reasons he couldn't explain, or maybe didn't want to, it had been directed at him. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. Dry Hollow wasn't the kind of town where things happened, not the kind of place where people disappeared or were hidden in plain sight. And yet, that woman, her sharpness, her grip on the boy's wrist, the way she moved fast but didn't want to be noticed. Like someone covering tracks even when no one was chasing. Something inside Connor, something old and cold and terribly precise, stirred. He didn't know the boy's name, didn't know who the woman was, didn't know what their story might be. But he knew this. That boy had reached out. He had called for help. Not with a scream or a sob, but with discipline, with intent, with hope. And somehow, impossibly, he had chosen Connor to receive it. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his small, leather-bound notebook, the one he used for odd thoughts, grocery lists, reminders. He flipped past pages of dates and old addresses and found a blank spot, then wrote 3 things, quickly. Green trench coat, blonde hair, early 40s. Boy, 6, signal, 3 fingers, palm inward. Confirmed. He stared at the page for a moment longer, then added one more line. Do not ignore this. The last rays of sun slid behind the rooftops. A cool breeze rolled in from the west, the kind that smelled like dust and dry bark, and something coming that hadn't quite arrived. Connor stood. Asher rose beside him, no command needed. They started back toward home, the way they always did, man and dog, steps in rhythm, breath in sync. But this time, the silence between them wasn't restful, it was charged. A fuse had been lit. Somewhere in the space between 3 fingers and a boy's hollow eyes, something had begun. Connor didn't know what. But Asher had already seen enough, and he wasn't about to look away. The next morning came without ceremony, no storm, no revelation. Just the slow crawl of dusty Texas sunlight pressing through the slats of the blinds and onto the scuffed hardwood floors of Connor Briggs's kitchen. The air was still cool, but there was a weight to it, the kind that came before heat settled in for good. Connor sat at the table, cradling a chipped ceramic mug between both hands. The coffee inside had gone cold 30 minutes ago. He hadn't touched it since the first sip, not because he'd forgotten, but because he couldn't turn on its own. He hadn't made a sound all morning, but his posture said more than enough. He wanted to go back. Connor didn't argue. By 7:15, boots were laced, mug left untouched. The door opened without a word, and the pair stepped into the quiet street. The leash clipped to Ash's collar more out of habit than necessity. They walked in silence. But today, it wasn't the kind of silence Connor had grown used to. It was intentional, listening, watching. Asher's pace was different too, quicker, purposeful. He wasn't sniffing mailboxes or tracking squirrels. He had a direction, and Connor didn't need to ask where they were headed. They were going back to Jefferson Court. The walk took 15 minutes, give or take. The town hadn't changed overnight, but something about it felt thinner, like the wind had taken a truth with it and left behind a vacancy. When they turned onto the block, Connor's hand instinctively brushed the notebook tucked in his jacket. The notes from yesterday were still there, but today, it wasn't theory anymore. Now, it was personal. Asher slowed as they reached the corner of Jefferson and Birch, the same intersection where they'd first seen the woman and the boy. His body shifted subtly, ears pricked, head lowered. His tail no longer swayed. He was locked in. Connor scanned the row of duplexes. They looked the same: peeling paint, sun-warped blinds, rusted mailboxes, clinging stubbornly to concrete steps. He counted windows, checked for movement, registered the new, a black car that hadn't been there yesterday, a curtain now drawn shut where it had once been open. But Asher wasn't interested in cars or steps. He led Connor toward the building at the far end of the row. Unit 3B. It was nothing special. Same brick pattern, same iron gate at the back. But Asher slowed near the east-facing wall, just below a ground-level window that looked half-buried by overgrown weeds and forgotten flower beds. The basement. Asher stopped, sat, stared. Connor followed his gaze. The window was dirty, not visibly broken, but the kind of clouded glass that came from years without cleaning. On the other side, behind a sagging set of floral-patterned curtains, something moved. Just a flicker, a twitch of fabric, a shift in shadow. Connor stepped closer. He waited, watched. Then, slowly, the curtain pulled back just an inch. Enough for a child-sized face to peek through. Pale skin, wide eyes, too fast to see clearly but unmistakable in shape. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the curtain dropped. Connor didn't move. His pulse thudded gently behind his ears. Banged shut. But none of it mattered. What mattered had just confirmed itself. Someone was behind that window, and that someone was watching. Connor stood slowly, no sudden movements, no posturing, just the calm stillness of a man who had once waited in the hills of Marja for an enemy he never saw coming. He took a small notebook from his jacket and scribbled a single line. Basement window, Unit 3B. Child inside. Curtains floral. Time 7:52 a.m. He underlined it once, then tucked the notebook away. Asher finally shifted his weight, glanced up at Connor, then returned to his post. They stayed there for another 2 minutes, silent, still, listening. But the curtain didn't move again. Whoever had looked out was either gone or hiding, or both. Connor let out a breath through his nose. It wasn't a lot, but it was something. Enough to know yesterday wasn't a fluke, enough to know that boy wasn't allowed to leave. They turned and walked back down the sidewalk, retracing their steps. Not because the loop was done, but because this time the job was starting. Not the kind with uniforms or orders, but the kind that lived in the quiet margins of the world, between instincts and silence, between dogs that growled at shadows and men who had seen too much to ignore them. Asher glanced back once, just before they turned the corner out of sight. Connor didn't have to. He already knew. They were being watched, and they weren't going to stop watching back. They returned just before dusk. Connor didn't tell himself it was a coincidence. It wasn't. The decision to walk again, to loop back toward Jefferson Court, had nothing to do with habit and everything to do with the silence that had followed them home that morning. The kind that stuck to the walls long after they'd closed the front door. Some silences carried weight. This one carried warning. Asher had sensed it too. All afternoon, the dog had stayed by the window, unmoving, eyes fixed on the outside like something out there was thinking of coming in. He didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He waited. So by early evening, when the sun had begun its quiet descent behind the rooftops of Dry Hollow, Connor had picked up the leash without saying a word. Asher stood instantly, no bark, no stretch, no delay. The sky was gold-gray as they walked, that hour between heat and cool, when the wind came in dry swells, and the trees cast long, crooked shadows across the fences. The town was quieter now, more still than usual, as if something in it was holding its breath. When they reached the block, Connor didn't head toward the main sidewalk. Instead, he slipped behind the row of duplexes, where an alley ran narrow and uneven, paved once long ago, but now vines sat the basement window. Asher found it first. He didn't bark, didn't even whine, he just stopped. Ears forward, nose low, muscles taut. Connor knelt beside him. From here the window looked even more worn than it had that morning. The floral curtain hadn't moved. The glass had a slight fog to it, streaked with grime, but Connor could still make out the faint outline of a room, shapes, edges, the corner of something that looked like a dresser, too low to be adult-sized. He crouched lower, elbows on knees, and listened. And in that moment, time stretched. The sounds of the alley faded. No more buzz of insects, no distant car tires over gravel. Even the wind seemed to slow. And then, behind the wall, behind that single pane of fogged glass, came a sound. Soft, dull, muffled. A door. Not one swinging open with welcome, but one closing with weight. Then silence again. Connor held his breath, and then a whimper, so faint it barely existed. The kind of sound that could have been a rustle, or an appliance kicking on, or the whisper of fabric over floor. But Asher's ears twitched. He'd heard it too. Connor felt a pressure rise in his chest. Not panic, but presence. A feeling he hadn't had since the last time he'd cleared a compound that looked empty until it wasn't. He shifted back on his heels, keeping his eyes on the window. Nothing moved inside. No shadows crossed. But the absence was almost louder than noise. He glanced at Asher, who remained still, breathing shallow and slow. Connor whispered, "Something's off." The words fell flat against the alley walls. No echo, just truth. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't a soldier seeing ghosts where there were none. This was pattern recognition. Small signs forming a shape. The boy's signal. The curtain movement. The bruise. The allergy reaction. And now, this. Connor pulled out his notebook again and scribbled another entry. 6:43 p.m. Asher fixated on basement window, rear alley. Heard door close inside, followed by faint whimper, childlike. No movement since. Window fogged but occupied. He flipped to a clean page and began sketching the layout of the alley from memory. Window locations, access paths, points of cover. A crude field diagram, but accurate. Then he noted one more detail. Chain on back gate is loose. Possible access if needed. Lock rusted. Not functional. He stared at that last line longer than necessary. Asher finally looked away from the window. His gaze swept the alley like a sentry. Then he sat down, still alert.
That progress was possible, even when it seemed impossibly slow. The path ahead would not be easy. For every step forward, there were setbacks, moments of backlash and disappointment. But the barrier had been broken, and it could not be rebuilt. Robinson's legacy is not just in his numbers or his trophies. It is in the way he carried himself, in the dignity he brought to every game. He did not let the world's hatred define him. Instead, he defined what it meant to meet adversity with grace. The courage he showed on the field echoed far beyond the ballpark. It became part of the fabric of a changing nation. As the season wore on, Robinson's success became undeniable. He helped lead the Dodgers to the National League pennant. Fans who once doubted him now cheered his name. But the work was far from finished. Segregation still ruled much of American life. The struggle for equality continued in schools, in neighborhoods, in workplaces. Robinson's breakthrough was a beginning, not an end. Looking back, it is easy to see Robinson's debut as part of a larger arc of progress. But in 1947, the outcome was anything but certain. The hatred he faced was real, immediate, and often overwhelming. He was not welcomed. He was tested. Each day brought new challenges, new reasons to quit. But Robinson kept going. His perseverance became a lesson in what was possible, even when the world seemed determined to say no. In the years that followed, Robinson's courage inspired others to take their own stands. The civil rights movement gathered strength. Laws changed, slowly at first, then more rapidly. The example of one man on a baseball field became a rallying point for a nation struggling to live up to its ideals. Robinson's story reminds us that change often begins with a single act of bravery, carried out in full view of those who would prefer things stay as they are. 1947 was a year of uncertainty and transition, a year when the country seemed to stand at a crossroads. In the midst of hidden fears and secret battles, Robinson's public act of courage offered a different vision, one where progress was possible, where the field could be leveled, if only for a moment. His story is a reminder that history is not just shaped by what happens behind closed doors, but by those who are willing to stand in the light, no matter the cost. As Robinson rounded the bases, the world around him was changing in ways both visible and unseen. The language of conflict itself was shifting, as new words began to capture the anxieties and hopes of a nation on edge. The next chapter of 1947's story would not be written on the field, but in the way people talked about the world, how a single phrase could frame an era, and how the power of a name could help shape the battles yet to come. There are moments in history when the language itself begins to shift, when the words people use to describe the world quietly change the shape of what they see. In 1947, the old
reinforced. A child had made contact, disappeared, and was now being hidden, and no one else seemed to notice. He crossed the room, crouched beside the low bookshelf, and pulled out a leather-bound journal. Not the same one he'd used for shopping lists or vet appointments. This was older, thicker. The one he'd carried in the desert. Pages filled with field sketches, layouts of compounds, call signs, and coordinates scribbled in pencil now faded with time. He flipped to a clean page, wrote in slow, measured strokes. Subject, unknown child, likely male, 6 to 7 years old. Location, 3B Jefferson Court. Status, confined. Confirmed movement, no sound, no signs of schooling or outdoor activity. Visual contact made twice. Signal confirmed. Behavioral cues consistent with emotional suppression. Immediate concern, prolonged isolation, emotional abuse, physical restraint possible. Action, observe. Record, verify. Prepare escalation protocol if necessary. He paused, then underlined the last line twice. Prepare escalation protocol. That wasn't something he wrote lightly. He stared at it for a moment longer. His thumb rubbed absently at the frayed edge of the page. His mind had already begun to compartmentalize. What he needed to check, who he could call, how much he could access now that he was technically retired. He wasn't law enforcement. He wasn't active duty. But he still had contacts, and there were still things he could do without a badge. Behind him, Asher shifted. Connor turned. The dog hadn't moved from the window, but now his ears were angled differently, less alert, more tuned. He gave a soft huff. Barely a sound, but enough. Connor crossed the room and sat down beside him. Outside, across the way, the lights in the building began to go out one by one. No curtain moved again. But the silence pressed harder now, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that hid things. Connor rested his hand on Asher's back, fingers slipping into the thick fur behind the shoulder. "I saw him," he said quietly. Asher blinked once. Connor didn't need confirmation. He already knew. Tomorrow they'd return, and they'd look deeper. Connor hadn't slept. He didn't toss, didn't pace the floor or lie awake staring at the ceiling. That wasn't his kind of insomnia. Instead, he sat at the worn desk near the back of the house, the glow of the laptop screen casting soft shadows on the wall, while the world outside slowly forgot the sound of traffic and turned in for the night. Asher lay curled nearby, but his eyes remained half open, watching. There was no noise beyond the occasional tap of keys. Favors and forgotten missions had left him with a few tools no one really bothered to revoke. He wasn't doing this for curiosity. This was reconnaissance. He opened the National Civilian Property Registry first, typing in the address from his notes. Jefferson Court, Unit 3B. The screen loaded slowly. A splash of beige. A government-issued interface, not designed for elegance, only function. He leaned in. Leaseholder. Veronica Hale. Age 44. Single occupancy. No dependents listed. He wrote the name down on a fresh page in his field journal. The letters looked too neat against the battered lines. Next came the cross-check. He opened the personnel verification system. It was old, a back-end interface mostly used for confirming veteran status or background on outreach cases. But Connor knew how to thread needles in its search protocols. A few keyword filters, a date range, and there she was. Hale, Veronica E. D.O.B., October 13th, 1979. Former occupation, child psychologist. Employer, Hillside Youth Center, El Paso Division. Employment status, terminated. Termination type, voluntary resignation. Leave of absence preceding termination, 9 months. Reason for leave, extended psychological distress following unresolved grief incident. Remarks. Behavioral irregularities noted. Peer concern cited. No disciplinary action filed. Suspension not pursued due to resignation. License status. Suspended. Not renewed. Connor stared at the screen. His hand tightened around the pen, still resting between his fingers. There was nothing overtly criminal here, nothing explosive. But there was something else, a pattern he'd seen before in after-action reports and personnel files of medics who'd cracked in the field. Grief that turned inward, behavior that went sideways. She had worked with children for at least a decade. That wasn't unusual. What caught his eye was the duration of leave. 9 months off the grid. Not medical leave, not reassignment, just gone. And then a resignation. Quiet, clean. Like someone choosing to disappear instead of being forced out. He opened a new tab, moving into civilian digital footprint checks. Legal, but only just. A list. They left imprints. They filed things, applied for licenses, appeared in newsletters or board memos. At the very least, someone had vouched for them. But after 2021, she vanished. No new employment records, no academic publications, no online presence. And yet 2 years later, she resurfaces in a low-income housing unit in Dry Hollow, Texas, with a child no one knows. And no documentation to suggest she should have one. He checked the state immunization registry. Nothing. No recent entries tied to her address. No pediatric visits billed under her name. No child health benefits claimed. No proof of school enrollment within county lines. And still the boy was there, living, breathing, signaling. Connor sat forward again, typed one more search, one he'd hoped wouldn't return what he feared. He cross-referenced Veronica Hale's name against missing child alerts in the region over the last 3 years. Nothing obvious. Then he expanded the range, national, last 5 years. Still nothing. He narrowed his eyes, rephrased, inputted her last known address instead of her name. 3 pings. One of them, a high-profile missing persons report from 2 years ago. Leo Whitmore, age 4 at time of disappearance. Last seen in Portland, Oregon. Son of Mara Whitmore, private investor. Case listed as ongoing. No suspects charged. No evidence of abduction, but foul play not ruled out. Connor stared at the photo on the right side of the screen. A boy. Thin shoulders, wide eyes, hair falling slightly over his brow. He didn't have to look twice. It was the same boy. He closed his eyes. The soft whimper behind the basement glass. The bruise on the wrist. The silence. He opened his eyes and reached for his pen. A new name now, Leo. He wrote it beneath the previous notes, circled it once, then drew a thin line down to Veronica Hale's. No one else saw it yet, but he did. And now that he had, he wasn't going to unsee it. The cursor blinked. Silent. Waiting. Accusing. Connor stared at the screen like it was breathing. Every so often, the soft tap of a key broke the silence, followed by Asher's slow, steady breathing from the floor nearby. The name still echoed in his head. Leo. He hadn't heard it spoken aloud, hadn't needed to. The look in the boy's eyes did more than any voice could. The same look he'd seen in children overseas after the dust cleared and the bodies were zipped up. A gaze that no 6-year-old should wear. As if the world had touched them too early and left fingerprints they couldn't scrub off. He clicked into the missing persons database again. This time, he filtered tighter. Male, age 5 to 7. Disappeared within the last 3 years. No recovered remains. No confirmed sightings post-disappearance. Suspected abduction. Facial reconstruction available. One by one, thumbnails populated the screen. Too many. Connor adjusted the radius, West Coast first. Then no known suspects. Another layer down, mothers with sole custody. That's when the photo reappeared. Row 4, far right. He clicked it. Case ID, MW0218LW. The report was dated June 14, 2 years prior. The file wasn't long, only 6 pages, but every word stuck. Leo Elijah Whitmore, age 4. Missing from Portland, Oregon. Mother, Mara Elaine Whitmore, financial strategist and reclusive heiress. No father listed. Disappearance classified as non-forced entry. Bedroom window found open. Stuffed animal on floor. No ransom demand. No known enemies. No criminal record tied to mother. Search dogs lost scent at the edge of a private road. Connor scrolled down until the photo filled the screen again. It wasn't just similar. It wasn't maybe. It was him. The same tilt of the head. The same hollow posture, like he'd been taught to take up less space. The same left ear slightly bent at the top. And there, near the neckline of his shirt, just visible under the collar, a small crescent-shaped birthmark. Connor exhaled, long and slow. He reached for the photo he'd printed earlier from the camera, the grainy shot of the boy from Jefferson Court. Blurred by distance, slightly out of focus, but the posture was unmistakable. The shoulder line, the way the boy's right hand clutched the hem of his jacket, and the face, half turned, but not enough to hide the fear. He placed the 2 photos side by side. "They're the same kid," he murmured. Asher lifted his head at the sound of his voice. Connor rubbed his forehead, tension pulsing just behind his eyes. He knew what this meant, not in theory, but in lived experience, in the sharp, real way that scars taught you things books never could. This wasn't some missing child still lost in a system. This was a ghost, a boy the world had already mourned, a file marked cold by every department that didn't want to spend another dollar chasing shadows. And yet, here he was, alive, in Dry Hollow, held in silence by a woman no one was watching. Connor reached for the old field journal, turned to a blank page, and wrote the name carefully at the top. Leo Elijah Whitmore. Underneath he wrote, "Confirmed visual ID, 98% certainty. Behavior matches trauma response profile. Signal recognition, SOS, 3 fingers inward. Trained Q. Location, Jefferson Court, Unit 3B. Guardian, Veronica Hale. No legal custody. No registration. Time elapsed since abduction, 2 years. Emotional condition, flat affect. Possible isolation trauma. Shadows. It was about protection, defense, bringing the vulnerable back. Most men forgot that oath when the war ended. Connor hadn't. He stared again at the screen. The boy's eyes looked through him. Something in that look said, "I'm still here. I'm still waiting." And God help the world if no one else had been paying attention. He leaned over, closed the laptop slowly. The next steps weren't impulsive. They had to be careful, surgical. Veronica Hale might be disturbed, but she wasn't careless. Not if she'd kept a missing billionaire's child hidden for this long. Under the radar, without alerting a single camera, therapist, or school. Connor didn't know what her motive was, not yet, but he didn't need the why, not now. He had the who, the where, and the when. And sometimes, that was enough to start a rescue. The number wasn't easy to find. Connor had to dig. Old-school directories, discontinued faculty listings, a single archived web page from a summer guest lecture series at a women's college in Colorado, where Mara Whitmore had once spoken about ethical investment and post-trauma resilience. A talk that, in retrospect, must have been more personal than academic. From there, it took another hour, threading through contact requests, piecing together old, non-profit donations she'd made under a pseudonym, then linking them to a landline listed under a foundation she'd quietly funded. The Whitmore Trust for Missing Youth. A bitter irony, Connor thought. A woman searching for children while the world had stopped searching for hers. He left a message. Simple, controlled. "Ms. Whitmore, my name is Connor Briggs. I'm not law enforcement. I'm not looking for money. I served in Fallujah. I now live in Dry Hollow, Texas. I believe I may have seen your son, Leo. Please call me back as soon as you can. If this is too much or the wrong lead, I understand. But there's one thing I must say." He used the signal. 3 fingers, palm inward. He didn't leave a callback number. He didn't need to. He knew if she still had that message saved in her heart, the way most parents carried the last words of their children, she'd understand. And she did. The phone rang at 2:43 a.m. Connor had been awake, sitting in the kitchen with Asher curled beneath the table, his field journal open, his coffee cold. He answered without hesitation. No voice at first, just breath. Then, "Briggs?" "Yes." A pause, one filled with years. Then a quiet question, brittle as glass. "What did you just say, on the message?" Connor leaned forward, his voice steady. "Speak. If there were cameras, just do that. And I'd find him." Another pause, shorter this time. "Where?" she asked. "Dry Hollow, Jefferson Court Apartments. I've been watching. I didn't intervene yet because," he hesitated, "I needed to be sure. And I needed to find you." "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm still here." He could hear her begin to cry, but it wasn't the shattering kind. It was restrained, practiced. Like a woman who'd cried in private for 2 years and had learned how to breathe between the breaks. Not sobs, just long exhales that shook on the way out. Connor let her speak first. "I buried an empty casket," she said. "They told me it was most likely trafficking, or worse. I paid private investigators. I offered rewards. Then came the silence. People stopped calling back. The agencies stopped returning emails. The sympathy wore off." She took a breath, steadied herself. "I'm not crazy," she said. "I know what people think of women like me. Alone, wealthy, emotional. They think we lose perspective. They call it complicated grief. But I never stopped looking. I couldn't. You were right not to, Connor said. Your son's alive. The weight of those words hung there, as if saying them aloud somehow stitched the boy's soul back into the world a little more firmly. How is he? She asked. Did he look hurt? Connor chose his words carefully. He looks quiet, tense, like he's learned how to survive by becoming invisible. But he's aware. He saw me. He saw Asher, my dog, and he still chose to signal. That takes courage. She inhaled again, shakily. He always loved dogs. Connor allowed himself the smallest smile. Then he would have liked Asher. There was a beat of silence. I need to come there, Mara said suddenly. I'll take the next flight. I have a private pilot. He's on standby. Don't rush in, Connor said, tone shifting gently but firmly. He's still in danger. Whoever has him, a woman named Veronica Hale, is unstable but careful. I don't think she knows I've noticed yet. If we're going to get him out, we need to do this right. So what's next? I keep eyes on him. I don't spook her. You stay safe, but ready. When the moment's right, you'll be the first person I call. There was a pause. Then, thank you, she said. You're the first real hope I've had in 2 years. Connor's jaw clenched slightly. He'd heard those words before. In other deserts, from other mothers. Wind passed through the alley like it always did. Soft, forgettable. But to Connor, everything had changed. There were no coincidences now, no more chance encounters. Only a boy who dared to send a silent message into the world. And a mother who never stopped listening. And him, a man who'd already buried too many ghosts. This time, he was going to bring someone home. East Hollow Park was nearly empty by mid-morning. The playground swings creaked in the breeze, untethered laughter from an earlier hour long since faded. Only a few benches remained occupied. An older man with a newspaper, a mother checking her phone while her toddler poked at ants, and Connor Briggs, who sat with the posture of someone at rest but eyes that missed nothing. Asher lay at his feet, head up, body still, save for the slow flick of his tail every few seconds, not out of boredom, but of calculation. Every sound, every breeze, every child's cry was measured, stored. Connor took a slow sip from a paper cup of black coffee, second one that morning. The kind of burnt bitterness he preferred. It gave his nerves something to bite down on. His gaze remained fixed on the walking trail that circled the perimeter of the park, the same trail where he'd seen them 3 days ago. He didn't need to check his watch. He already knew. At exactly 11:17 a.m., she appeared. Veronica Hale. Same composed gait, same deliberate posture, her hair tied back in a no-nonsense bun, crisp beige blouse, slacks that looked recently ironed. But today, she wore sunglasses, something she hadn't last time. And the boy wore blue this time, a light jacket zipped halfway up. But it was him. Even from this distance, Connor could see it. Leo. His pace matched hers, but only because she said it. He wasn't skipping, wasn't smiling, just walking in silence, like a shadow tethered to a body that didn't belong to it. As they passed the far edge of the trail, Asher stirred. Connor didn't speak, didn't have to. The shepherd stood up quietly, ears forward, muscles taut without a sound. Not a growl, not even a whine, but his body leaned forward slightly, the way he did when something wasn't quite right but he couldn't act yet. Veronica was saying something. Connor couldn't hear the words, but he recognized the cadence, low, controlled, like someone narrating instructions. Her hand rested on Leo's shoulder as they passed near the swings, and her fingers tightened briefly when he paused too long to look at a dog tied near a tree. Then it happened. Leo saw Asher. They were still across the park, maybe 30 yards away, but the boy's eyes flicked in their direction. Worn down by silent rules and invisible chains, had briefly rebelled. Not enough for Veronica to notice, but enough for Connor to feel it like a spark hitting dry brush. Connor didn't move, didn't nod, didn't acknowledge, but Asher did. The German shepherd took a single step forward, almost imperceptible, his head tilting gently, a motion as if to say, "I see you." Leo blinked slowly. Veronica tugged on his shoulder and continued walking. She never looked toward the bench. They passed by, their backs turned. The moment dissolved. Connor exhaled, not in relief, but in confirmation. The boy remembered, and more importantly, the boy had hope. The rest of the park blurred around him, the cars humming on the nearby street, the clicking of a sprinkler head across the field, all fell into the background. Connor watched them disappear around the bend in the trail. He glanced down at Asher, who was still watching the path where the boy had vanished. "Good," Connor murmured. "He's still in there." Asher shifted, gave a low huff, something between agreement and restlessness. Connor leaned forward on the bench, hands clasped, elbows on knees. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll try again. And this time, we'll leave a sign of our own." The next morning, Connor returned to East Hollow Park with nothing but a leash in his hand and something sharper than suspicion in his chest. He wasn't sure what today would bring, but Asher was sure. The German shepherd walked with the quiet tension of purpose, not aggressive, not urgent, but focused, like he already knew who he needed to see. They took the same route, past the creaking swing set, past the duck pond with its layer of green film, past the shaded bench where, 3 days ago, Connor had started to lose his grip on indifference. And then they saw them, Veronica and the boy. She wore a floral blouse today, hair still tied back, but her body language was different, stiffer, almost brittle, as if something had unsettled her. She held Leo's hand tightly, fingers interlocked like chains, but he wasn't pulling away. He didn't resist. He simply existed beside her, like he didn't belong to the day around him. Asher slowed, then stopped. Connor kept his distance, 10 feet away, maybe less, just enough not to be threatening, just enough to be casual. He bent slightly, adjusting the clip on Asher's leash, letting time do its thing. Veronica noticed them. Of course she did. Her expression stayed neutral, lips pressed in a soft line, chin slightly raised, top of Asher's head, just between the ears. Not a random pat, not a child's uncertain stroke, but a placement. Intentional. Remembered. Asher stilled, closed his eyes, and pressed slightly into the touch. Connor's chest tightened. He'd seen that gesture before, in Marines reunited with their service dogs after deployment, in children who'd survived trauma and found in a dog's fur the only softness they could trust. But never like this. Not with a child who shouldn't have remembered anything. Veronica's voice cut through the moment like a hairline crack in glass. "Lucas," she said gently, too gently. "Let's not bother the nice man's dog." Connor straightened and smiled faintly. "He's not bothered. He chooses who gets to pet him. Your boy passed the test." She laughed, too fast. "Lucas has always been good with animals." "Lucas, huh?" Connor repeated. Veronica shifted slightly. "Yes, that's his name." The boy didn't react to it, didn't turn, didn't answer. Asher looked up at Connor, just a flick of the eyes, a pulse in the air. Connor caught it. He crouched, slowly, coming down to the boy's eye level, careful not to touch him. "Hey there," he said, voice low and warm. "He's a shepherd. You ever been around one before?" The boy nodded once. "Did you have one?" Connor asked, casually. Another nod. This one a little slower. "What was his name?" Connor asked. Veronica answered too quickly. "Oh, we never had one. But Lucas loves dogs. He probably saw one on TV." Connor didn't take his eyes off the boy. The boy blinked slowly. Then his lips moved. No sound at first. Then, almost inaudible, "Milo." Connor felt the name drop into his chest like a stone. Milo. He looked up at Veronica. Her face had stiffened. "Milo," Connor repeated, softly. "That's a good name." Veronica smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. "He gets ideas sometimes. Imagination." Connor rose slowly, brushing his hands off. "Well, he's got good instincts. So does my guy." Veronica looked down at Asher. "He's calm. Unusual for a shepherd." Connor nodded. "He's trained to be calm. Until he doesn't have to be." She smiled, faltered. Connor added, "You two live around here?" She hesitated. "Just visiting family." "Ah," he said. Asher, his fingers brushed the dog's head once more. Not to say hello, to say, "I remember." And Connor? He didn't move, because now he knew the boy was reaching out. The leash between him and Asher was still loose, but inside, everything had gone taut. The war had just shifted. And so had the odds. Connor didn't move. He stood rooted at the edge of the park, where the dry grass met the pavement, eyes trained on the boy's retreating figure. Something about Leo's steps lingered, not the shuffle of a distracted child, but the quiet, guarded gait of someone conditioned to not be noticed. And Asher hadn't budged either. The German shepherd stood still, not facing the woman, not even the boy. He faced sideways, halfway between Connor and Leo, but his body angled just enough to block a clear path between Veronica and the child. Subtle, instinctive, deliberate. Veronica, sensing the tension, paused. She offered a polite smile again, one hand lightly pressed to Leo's shoulder, guiding him to move. But Leo hesitated. He looked up at Asher, then down. And in that moment, he did something so small that no one else would have noticed. He tugged at the sleeve of his hoodie, just slightly adjusting the cuff that had ridden up his wrist. And Connor saw it, a bruise, not fresh, faded just enough to be missed, but still there, yellowing at the edges, a smear of blue-purple right across the thin skin of the forearm. Too wide for a fall, too clean for a scrape. It was a grip mark, restraint. Connor didn't blink, didn't speak, but something inside him retracted, like the slow internal clicking of a scope being dialed into focus. He had seen those kinds of bruises before, on POWs, on children smuggled through borders, on boys who'd learned too young how to stay quiet when it mattered most. Veronica noticed the pause. She followed Connor's gaze, saw the exposed wrist, and her grip on the boy's shoulder stiffened just slightly, enough for Asher to notice. The dog's body shifted, his front paw sliding forward, nothing aggressive, just a claim of space, a silent line in the dust. Veronica's smile faded, replaced by something brittle. "We really should be going," she said, more to herself than to Connor. Connor gave a slow nod, but his voice was steel-wrapped in flannel. "Maybe take it easy on the arm," he said. She blinked. "Excuse me?" He stepped forward just a hair, just enough to feel the heat from Asher's back. "The boy's sleeve. It's warm today, but he's layered. Long something in." Asher let out a low sound, not quite a growl, a warning. Protective, quiet, calibrated. The way trained canines alert their partners without panicking civilians. Veronica's hand slipped from the boy's shoulder. She bent low, suddenly sweet. "Come on, Lucas, we're going to be late." Connor caught the flicker. Her tone changed only when she spoke to the boy. Too bright, too rehearsed. Leo followed, but not before casting one last look at Asher. That look undid Connor. It wasn't just longing, it was calculation. Leo knew what he was doing. He was testing boundaries. He was mapping allies. Connor exhaled slowly, silently. He waited until they were almost out of sight before muttering under his breath, "He doesn't need rescue." Asher looked up at him. "He needs extraction." Connor turned, heading down the sidewalk toward home, but his mind had already begun the shift, gears turning, old instincts uncoiling like rusted clockwork. This wasn't just a missing child case anymore. This was something darker, something personal, and the bruises were only the beginning. The next day, the sun hung low behind hazy clouds, painting Dry Hollow in a dull, pewter light. Connor sat on a weather-worn bench just off the walking trail that curved near the back edge of East Hollow Park, the same spot where he'd seen them before. He waited. Asher lay still at his feet, one ear twitching every now and then toward a sound only he could hear. Distant footsteps, squirrels in the brush, the faint rattle of chain-link fences in the wind. Then they appeared. Veronica in her usual neutral-toned cardigan, sunglasses pushed high on her head, and the boy. Same solemn gait, hands in the pockets of an oversized hoodie. Connor stood as they neared. Asher didn't move, but his gaze locked onto the child. Veronica offered a controlled smile. "We seem to keep bumping into you." Connor returned the smile, nothing warm about it. "I take walks here most days," he replied. "Same route, same hour, old habit." He crouched, opening a small zippered pouch. "You mind if I offer him something?" Veronica tilted her head. "Offer who?" Connor held up a bright blue packet of peanut M&Ms. "Little treat," he said. "Figured the dog earned it, but I've got extra." Leo's eyes flicked toward the packet, just for a second. Then he stepped back, visibly. His posture stiffened, face suddenly pale. "No," he whispered. The first word Connor had ever heard from him, not just refusal. It was fear. Asher caught it too. The dog shifted, eyes narrowing at the boy's reaction, not at Leo, but at what triggered him. Connor didn't press. He stood slowly, keeping the candy in hand. Veronica gave a tight laugh. "Oh, he's just shy. Doesn't like strangers handing him sweets." Connor raised a brow, his voice casual. Peanut allergy? Veronica recoil that came from muscle memory, not preference.
And Connor remembered the report. Leo Whitmore, peanut allergy, severe, documented. The kind of allergy where schools keep EpiPens on site. He looked at the boy again. The tremble was gone, buried fast. But the way Leo's fingers curled into fists inside his pockets, that lingered. Connor knelt beside Asher and offered the candy to the dog instead. Asher sniffed the packet, then sat, uninterested. But his tail flicked once, and his ears remained high. He was listening, watching, reading the air. Veronica tugged at Leo's sleeve. "Come on, Lucas. Time to head home." Connor nodded, but his eyes never left her face. "You sure he doesn't have allergies?" he asked gently, folding the candy into his palm. Veronica smiled. "Too tight. I think I'd know." And that was the moment Asher growled, low, controlled, chest deep, but pointed at her. Veronica froze, not because of the sound, but because it was so measured. Not a bark, not an accident, a trained alert, a warning. Connor didn't stop him. Instead, he stood and dusted his hands off. "I think I'd know too," he said quietly. Leo glanced up at him then, just a flick of the eyes, and for the first time, a flicker of something else. Recognition. Hope, maybe. Connor's heart tugged, but he kept his tone even. "Well," he said to no one in particular. "Good to know someone still reads labels." Veronica said nothing as she turned away. Leo followed, his small shoes barely making a sound on the gravel. But his hand, as he walked behind her, never re-entered his pockets. He held them at his sides. And for a moment, just before they turned the corner and vanished from view, Leo brushed his fingertips along Asher's back as they passed. 1, 2, 3 fingers. Brief, deliberate. And then he was gone. Connor exhaled slowly. Asher stood beside him, tense. "They're slipping," Connor murmured. "She's scared." He looked down at the packet of peanut M&Ms still clutched in his fist. And he remembers everything. Wind slithered through the narrow alley behind Jefferson Court, lifting dust and wilted ivy like a restless tide. Connor moved in its shadow, posture low, feet memorizing each cracked paver so he could retrace them blind if he had to. In his gloved hand was a matte black recorder, military surplus, pocket-sized, with dual parabolic mic.
Hairline crack in the glass. A strip of black tacky putty sealed it. From the yard, the device vanished against peeling paint. He brushed Asher's flank, good boy, then slipped back through the alley's broken fence, boot soles finding their own footprints. The entire insertion had taken 90 seconds. 90 seconds that felt like holding a breath beneath deep water. Hours later, midnight draped Dry Hollow in a hush that belonged to abandoned things, unwatered lawns, shucked blinds, dreams no longer tended. Inside the rented garage, 3 doors down, Connor sat at a rickety card table, headphones cupping his ears. Beside him, Asher lay sphinx still, eyes fixed on the roll-up door as if expecting it to lunge inward. A faint static hiss filled a headset, punctuated by the creak of aging pipes. House sounds, skeletal and permanent. Connor adjusted the gain. The recorder's time code flashed, 01302, then Through the noise, a door thudded. Soft footfalls. A woman's voice, Veronica's, emerged just above a whisper. "Tommy," she crooned, syrupy and tight. "Tommy." Silence. Another footfall, lighter, hesitant. "Say the words." Her tone sharpened, like a violin string drawn too tight. "Tell me who you are. Tell me." Connor's pulse ticked in his throat. He raised a hand. Asher's ears flicked, registering the tension. A child's voice, Leo's, came, barely audible. "I'm Leo." Veronica hissed. Fabric rustled, then a muffled knock as something, perhaps a fist, met wood. "No, not tonight. Tonight you're Noah, remember?" Her pitch slid from sing-song to gravel, as though two people argued inside the same throat. "Lucas is a story. Tommy is a lie. Noah is safe. Safe because I made you." The boy didn't answer. The recorder captured breathing, hers quick and shallow, his thin as paper. "Repeat." Silence. A sharper impact, wood on wood, maybe the closet door Connor had pictured a dozen times. Leo whimpered, a tiny sound swallowed by walls. "Repeat, Noah." "Noah." Again. "Noah." "Good." Her voice slid back to sweet. "Mother loves you, Noah. Now forget the others. Forget Leo. Forget Lucas. Forget Tommy. Those names hurt you. I keep you safe." Connor closed his eyes, jaw rigid. He'd heard psychological breaking tactics in war zones, interrogators trading sugar for salt, comfort for cruelty. But hearing it wielded against a child knotted something primal beneath his ribs. Trembled, the adrenaline arriving late, like aftershocks. Asher rose and pressed his head into Connor's knee, a silent question. "It's worse than I thought," Connor whispered. "She's fracturing him, shaping which pieces survive." The dog chuffed, low and frustrated, then turned to stare at the door again. Waiting. Connor flipped open his field journal, the page already headlined Audio 1. He noted timestamps, quotes, emotional tone. Under assessment he wrote, "Multiple identities enforced, conditioning through praise-punishment cycle. Possible dissociation in child. Immediate risk, psychological disintegration. Extraction timeline accelerated." He set the pen down, rubbed gritty exhaustion from his eyes. Every instinct screamed that time was collapsing. Leo wasn't simply being hidden, he was being erased, rebuilt name by name, until even rescue might come too late to find the original boy. Connor looked at Asher. The dog's steady gaze anchored him. "We move soon," he said. "No more waiting." Outside, a dry gust rattled the garage siding. The desert night carried on, indifferent. But inside those walls, two soldiers, one human, one canine, shared a silence that was not surrender, but preparation. And somewhere down the block, in a house with floral curtains and the smell of bleach, a child tried to remember which name belonged to the part of him that still hoped. Tomorrow, Connor promised himself. Tomorrow, the recorder would come out of the wall.
Wow, wow! Evidence in hand. And the plan, the real plan, would begin. Because if Veronica Hale thought she could keep a boy safe by shattering him, she hadn't yet met the men who specialized in pulling ghosts back into daylight. And they were coming. The garage clock ticked toward 3 a.m., carving silence into thinner and thinner pieces. But Asher would not lie down. Each time Connor coaxed him to the blanket in the corner, the shepherd rose again, pacing the concrete in tight, controlled loops. 4 steps, nose to the gap beneath the roll-up door, a muted growl in his chest, then back to Connor's side. Easy, Connor whispered, palm on the dog's shoulder. The fur twitched beneath his fingers like coiled wire. He understood. The tape they just heard still pulsed through both of them, as real as blood. Outside, dry hollow street lamps hummed and flickered in the wind. The town looked asleep, but Connor had learned long ago that darkness could hum with unseen motion. He slipped on his jacket, stepped to the side door, and eased it open. Desert night swept in, cool, dust-laced, tinged with sage and asphalt. Asher pressed past him, nose high. They moved together, shadows inside shadows.
Roof shingles. Asher sank to his haunches beside him, ears trained forward. Minutes stretched, nothing but wind. Then the light inside the basement flickered. Once, twice. A slow strobe, as though the bulb itself was breathing. A silhouette crossed behind the curtain, child-sized, head bowed. Connor's throat tightened. Leo. Another shape followed, taller, angular. Veronica. She seemed to hover behind him, speaking words the glass could not carry. Leo's shoulders caved. He folded inward, as if trying to take up less space than air. The bulb flicked off. Total dark. Connor felt heat surge up his spine, anger or resolve, he couldn't tell which. The system could take days, background checks, child welfare paperwork, warrant requests, days Leo didn't have. Every hour Veronica rewrote him. Noah, Tommy, Lucas, pieces chiseled away. Connor's hand closed around Asher's collar. The dog looked up, amber eyes catching stray moonlight. No bark, no whine, just readiness. "We're done waiting," Connor murmured. He pictured the plan he'd sketched earlier, entry through the rusted back gate, faulty lock. Descend 3 steps to the basement door, 9-pin cylinder, likely original to the 60s build, one of the easiest locks a Marine ever learned to pick. Extract the child, contain the threat, hand over evidence and custody to deputies already on his silent alert list. All of it faster than paperwork could catch them. Another pulse of light illuminated the window. The silhouette of Leo's hand lifted, hesitated, then pressed flat against the glass, as if testing whether there was still a world on the other side. That decided it. Connor opened the small canvas pouch at his belt, checking its contents by feel. Lockpicks, zip-tie cuffs, mini flashlight, tourniquet, glucose tabs, muscle memory packing for worst-case scenarios. He'd hoped to avoid using them on American soil. Hope was gone now. A car rumbled in the distance, growing louder. Connor flattened against the mesquite's trunk as headlights washed across the alley mouth. County patrol. Good. Backup he hadn't requested yet. He watched the cruiser pass, taillights dwindling, deputies making routine rounds, unaware that the war tonight hid behind floral curtains. When the hum faded, Connor exhaled. "Stay," he told Asher, though they both knew the command meant hold until called. The dog crouched low, blending into scrub shadow, muscles rippling under sable coat. Connor slipped along the fence toward the back gate, gentle push, barely a creak, and stepped onto the weed-choked patio. He counted Veronica's voice muffled, rising and falling in that eerie cadence, a lullaby slugged with menace. "Say thank you. Only Noah tonight, safe because of me." Connor slipped inside, letting darkness swallow him. Steps descended into a half-lit corridor. A single utility bulb buzzed overhead. Another flickered deeper down the hall, painting bars of shadow that stuttered across the walls. At the far end, an open doorway. Veronica's silhouette loomed over a small mattress on the floor. Leo knelt beside it, hands clasped between his knees. Connor's pulse slowed, battle rhythm. Every sense sharpened. He took one silent step. Glass shattered behind him. He spun, the basement window. Asher had charged through, claws clacking on tile as he landed inside. The shepherd's growl filled the narrow hall, low thunder rolling toward Veronica. She wheeled, eyes wide. For a heartbeat, all three froze in tableau. Predator, protector, prey. Leo looked up, saw Asher, and a tremor of recognition lit his face. Not fear, something like relief, fragile but alive. Veronica snapped, "Get back!" But the command wasn't to the dog, it was to the boy. Years of imposed obedience made Leo flinch, but he didn't move fast enough. Asher stepped between them, body shielding the child. Connor emerged from shadow. "It's over, Veronica." She backed toward a cluttered desk, fingers scrambling for something. Maybe the rusted knife Connor had seen earlier in her kitchen sink. He closed the distance, voice flat. "Hands where I can see them." Her gaze flicked from Connor to the dog to the boy, calculation shredding into panic. The system could take days, she might have thought, but Connor Briggs moved in seconds. Outside, sirens finally wailed, county deputies responding to the silent code he'd transmitted 5 minutes earlier. Child in danger, extraction active. Veronica's shoulders sagged. The fight left her in a single exhale. She slid to the floor, mumbling fragmented apologies to names that weren't hers to use. Asher eased back, letting Connor scoop Leo into steady arms. The boy clutched Connor's jacket, small fingers fisting canvas, breath hitching against his collarbone. "It's okay," Connor whispered, voice breaking soft. "I've got you, Leo. We're going home." In the hallway, flashing blue and red lights cut through the window shards, painting promise across concrete walls that had only ever known secrets. And for the first time in too many nights, Leo's silence felt lighter, like something that could at last begin to lift. The garage smelled of old oil and desert dust, a smell Connor Briggs had come to associate with planning. It was 1:13 a.m., barely 2 hours after he'd watched Leo's hand rise like a ghost behind the basement glass. Yet the space around him was already arranged with the order of a field outpost. On the folding table, lockpick roll opened flat, wrench, each steel piece glinting under a single clamplight. Zip-tie cuffs in 2 neat stacks of 5, tails pre-curved for fast tightening. Mini-mag light with red lens to preserve night vision. Tourniquet, quick-clot gauze, antiseptic wipes, butterfly stitches. A pocket med kit no bigger than a paperback, but built for ugly possibilities. Handheld radio already synced to the county dispatch frequency, receiving only, silent as a stone. Go bag, fresh shirt, cash, burner phone, and a rolled-up copy of Leo Whitmore's missing person PDF, wedged beside a USB drive labeled Audio 01. Evidence, packaged for whoever needed convincing, once the boy was safe. Asher lay beside the table, head up, every muscle in his frame dialed somewhere between patience and rapid deployment. He hadn't closed his eyes since dusk. Whenever Connor's boots scraped concrete, the dog's ears flicked. Ready, waiting. Connor slipped the headphones over one ear, hit play again on the recorder. Veronica's voice seeped through the hiss. "Tommy? No. Noah tonight. Say it. Thank me. Forget Leo." He stopped the track, throat tight. Enough. The file was a bullet. He didn't need to keep pulling the trigger on himself. He ejected the microcard and sealed it in a labeled envelope. Chain of custody. Evidence could live in plastic bags. Leo could not. Connor tapped the desk with 2 fingers. Old habit. The way squad leaders marked time before giving final orders. Then he opened a leather notebook to the newest page. At the top he'd written, Plan 2300Z. Objective, extract Leo. Beneath, a terse checklist. Confirm no adult male present. Visual sweep complete. Assess doors. Back gate chain loose. Verified. Basement latch misaligned. Verified. Entry tools pre-staged in pouch. Call queue to deputies, 10-minute delay after breach. Mother en route. ETA 5 hours. Update on success. He added one more line, underlined twice. Time is damage. Each minute Leo stayed behind those floral curtains. The fracture inside him widened. Something Veronica said on the tape kept looping in Connor's head. Sleep. Now. Tomorrow, we learn new verses. He closed the notebook and slid it into a chest pocket. Ready? He asked the room, though the question was only for the dog. Asher rose, shook once, gear settling on bone, and trotted to the garage door. He stared at the handle, tail still, the silent answer of a soldier who'd already packed farewell into every heartbeat. Connor slung the go-bag over his shoulder and clipped the leash to Asher's harness, but left the clasp unlocked. Elizabeth Hale. Evidence secured. If this log is found without me, check basement bedroom, Jefferson Court, 3B. He clicked the stop button, sealed the recorder in an evidence pouch, and tucked it into a metal cash box beneath the workbench. Combination 337, the number of his last unit. The garage door groaned as it rolled up, revealing an alley washed in sterile moonlight. Connor killed the bulb behind him, dropping the space to black. He pulled the hood of his jacket over his short-cropped hair and stepped outside, Asher gliding at his knee. The night air was cooler now, carrying the distant scent of creosote and rain-starved earth. Somewhere a train horn moaned across the flats, long, lonely, almost biblical. He paused at the alley mouth, scanning. No headlights, no porch silhouettes, just the metallic tick of cooling engines and telephone wires singing in the wind. He felt more than saw Asher's body relax into stealth mode, shoulders low, head level with spine, each paw placed like punctuation. All the paperwork in the world, the audio file, the birthmark photo, the database printouts, could not keep Leo from slipping further into the maze Veronica built in his mind. Courts required sunrise. Healing required now. Connor tightened the strap of the go-bag. The nylon rasped softly, loud as gunfire in the hush. He took a breath, tasting adrenaline on the back of his tongue. A memory flashed. Afghanistan, a compound wall, the moment before breaching when every possible future balanced on a hinge. He wasn't in uniform now, but the mission felt the same. Cross a door, pull life out of darkness. He clicked his tongue once. Asher moved. Together they slipped down the alley, shadows within shadows, toward the sagging fence that guarded Unit 3B's yard. The system could file reports tomorrow. Tonight, they would write their own. The night shattered. Connor heard it first, glass or crockery, something fragile hurling against wood, immediately followed by Veronica's voice, jagged and icy. "Say thank you, or I'll make you." No time for doubt. He was already at the back gate, bolt-cut chain hanging like a severed vein. Asher bristled beside him, hackles lifting in a silent snarl. Connor slipped the latch, eased the gate inward just far enough for the shepherd to glide through, then followed, boots barely kissing the dirt. The yard lay in half-shadow, dead grass, rusty patio chairs, a clothesline strung with stiff sheets that snapped faintly in the breeze. One bulb above the basement stairwell buzzed, throwing an anemic cone of light onto peeling paint. Beneath it, the service door, thin plywood, warped along the jamb. Connor's gloved hand found the knob and turned, unlocked, just as his recon had promised. He felt the house breathing, a low, throbbing tension pulsing through drywall. Inside, floorboards creaked. A child whimpered. Veronica's voice again, "Night light." Connor's eyes met Asher's. A shared command passed between them. Silent, swift. End this. He drew a breath, counted 1, 2, and swung the door wide. No squeak, he'd oiled the hinges earlier. They stepped into a narrow vestibule, reeking of bleach and stale humidity. Ahead, 3 wooden steps dipped to the basement, a hallway lit by a single naked bulb that flickered like the heartbeat of the house. Connor squeezed the mag light, red lens flooding the stairwell with ghost-dim glow. He moved left, Asher flowed right. Years of hall-clearing drills lined their motions, muscle memory writing choreography on the fly. Corners first, eyes high, footing soft. Halfway down the stairs, the dog halted, body rigid, nose flaring. Connor heard it too, labored breathing, quick shuddering gulps. A child's. Another crash, closer now. Something metallic clanged against concrete. Veronica's voice vibrating with fury. "Look at the mess! Look!" Connor reached the bottom, shouldered against the wall. The corridor split left and right. To the right, a storage room door ajar, boxes silhouetted. To the left, the glow of a lamp cut a trapezoid of light onto stained carpet. That was the bedroom. He signaled Asher with 2 fingers, a silent watch flank. The shepherd crept right, ensuring no one approached from behind. Connor pivoted left, stepping through the threshold. The room was chaos, clothes strewn across a mattress on the floor, broken ceramic shards glittering near the wall where a bedside lamp now lay toppled. Against that wall, Veronica loomed over Leo, her shadow monstrous in the low light. In her hand, a wooden spoon, split down the center from some previous strike. Leo knelt amid spilled crayons, shoulders caved, arms shielding his head. His breath hiccuped, but he was silent, like he'd learned sound invited worse. Veronica raised the spoon again. "Drop it," Connor said, voice the calm of cold iron. She whirled, startled into a half-scream that died in her throat when she saw the man and the dog framed in the doorway. The spoon clattered to the floor. How? Her eyes flicked to the hallway behind him, searching for exits that no longer existed. Asher chose that moment to step in, silent, teeth bared just enough to flash intention. He positioned himself between Leo and Veronica, a living barricade. Veronica's composure cracked. "Get out! You can't be here! I'll call the—" "Everything's recorded," Connor said, voice low. "The tape of you calling him by 3 names, the bruise on his arm, the allergy you denied. It ends tonight." She took a shaky step back. "You don't understand. He's mine. I saved him from—" "He's no one's possession," Connor advanced. "Where's the basement door key?" Veronica's gaze darted to gasped, and the small ring of keys slid from her palm into his. He pocketed them, then produced a pair of zip ties, binding her wrists before she fully realized resistance was useless. Footfalls padded behind him, Asher guiding Leo gently away from the broken porcelain. The boy's eyes were wide, shining in the half-light. Connor knelt, bringing himself level. "It's okay, Leo," he whispered. The name struck the boy like warm water after frost. He swallowed hard, trembling fingers brushing Asher's fur. Then, barely audible, "Milo?" A memory misnamed. Asher nosed his hand, tail giving one careful sweep. Connor touched Leo's shoulder. "We're leaving. Now." He rose, tugging Veronica to her feet. She muttered fractured protests, half apologies to Noah, to Tommy, looping like a broken reel. Connor guided her toward the hall. Sirens began to wail in the distance. Backup he'd cued through the silent radio ping 15 minutes earlier. Right on time. They climbed the basement stairs. At the threshold, Connor paused. He looked back at the room that had tried to erase a child's identity, at the crayons scattered like small flags of defiance across the carpet. Not anymore. He squeezed Leo's hand. The boy squeezed back, faint but alive. As the first red-blue strobe spilled through the back windows, Connor led them all into the night, the shepherd guarding their flank. The system finally forced to hurry because one soldier and one dog refused to move at its pace. Connor entered the storage room last, shoulder brushing the frame as Asher cleared left. The smell hit first, sour detergent and something metallic. Fear made physical. Boxes were stacked like crooked teeth along the walls, but one interior door caught the beam of his red-lensed flashlight. Narrow, painted the same off-white as the drywall, yet newer than everything else. No doorknob, just a cheap sliding latch at ankle height. Asher halted before it, muzzle low, ears flat. A low rumble vibrated through his chest, an alert Connor hadn't heard since Helmand. Connor dropped to one knee. The latch was double-looped with nylon rope, frayed from being tied and untied too often, too tight. He drew his knife, 3-inch Tonto, half serrated, and sliced clean through. The door sprang half open by its own tension, revealing blackness deeper than basement dark. He flicked the maglight's beam inside. Leo, the boy, sat on the concrete floor, wrists zip-tied in front of him, ankles taped together. A gag of floral bedsheet pressed between lips, knotted behind his head. Thin shoulder. Leo's bound hands reached instinctively, fingers burying into sable coat, the way a drowning hand clutches rope. The dog stilled, breathing slow, lending heartbeats. Connor cut the zip ties, then the duct tape, working fast but gentle. Circulation rushed back. Leo winced, shaking. Connor removed the gag, stuffed it in a cargo pocket, evidence later, and checked pupils. Responsive. The boy's lips formed a soundless word. Thanks. A floorboard groaned overhead. Connor's head snapped up. Footsteps. 2, 3, descending the main stairs. Slow. Deliberate. A voice hissed, shredded by rage. Where are you? Veronica. Connor whisked Leo behind him, hand resting on Asher's collar. The shepherd stood, hackles rising. They moved into the hall as Veronica reached the foot of the staircase. Her nightdress hung askew, feet bare on cold concrete, and in her right hand glinted a kitchen knife. A long chef's blade smudged with fingerprints and flickers of hallway light. Her eyes were wild, rimmed in crimson veins. She saw the opened closet, the cut ropes, the boy clinging to the dog, and something fundamental in her fractured. Voice broke into 2 pitches at once. He's mine. You can't take him. He said he loved me. Connor stepped forward, body angling to shield Leo. He kept his voice measured, eggshell calm. Put the knife down, Veronica. She shook her head, tears painting zigzags down her cheeks. Knife lifted, trembling. He promised. You don't understand. The world out there will eat him, but I, only I. Asher's growl rolled down the corridor, deep enough to make dust tremble off rafters. Veronica flinched. Connor's tone hardened. Knife. Down. Now. For a heartbeat, the hallway contained every possible future. Then a siren shrieked outside. Cruisers screeching to a stop at the curb. Doors thudding open. Veronica's eyes widened. Desperation eclipsed reason. She lunged. Asher launched first, controlled, surgical, front paws striking her torso, knocking the blade sideways. Connor closed in, twisting the knife from her grasp, wrenching her wrist behind her back. She fought like brittle glass. Sharp edges, no strength. He zip-tied her hands, read her rights, though breath came ragged. Deputies rushed in. drawn by the commotion. Their flashlights skated across concrete, catching Leo's face. One deputy holstered his sidearm when he saw the boy hugging Asher's neck. Connor handed Veronica. Asher padded beside, body blocking stray elbows and rushing boots. They emerged into pre-dawn chill. Red and blue strobes painted the yard. Early light bled violet on the horizon. Paramedics hurried over with a blanket. Connor set Leo down, the boy's fingers still laced into Asher's fur, anchoring to the only constant he trusted. Deputy Ruiz approached Connor, voice hushed. EMS will check him. CPS on scene within the hour. You good? Connor nodded. Exhaustion arriving like gravity. Mother's en route. ETA 3 hours. Ruiz squeezed his shoulder. We'll keep him safe till then. Hell of a thing you did. Connor half smiled. Wasn't just me. He looked down at Asher. The dog sat now, eyes on Leo, tail sweeping a slow reassurance across dewy grass. A pink band of dawn cut the sky, and in that new light, Leo finally spoke, hoarse but clear. Can we go where the dog goes? Connor knelt, met his gaze. Yeah, buddy. Wherever he goes, you're safe. Leo nodded, small, decisive, and leaned into Asher's shoulder. The shepherd pressed back, eyes closing as if, at last, watch could ease. Connor straightened, lungs drawing their first full breath in days. Sirens faded, deputies murmured, and the house behind them fell silent. Its secrets surrendered. Night had lost. And somewhere, miles away, a mother's phone would soon ring with a single word she had waited 2 years to hear. Found. Floodlights bathed Jefferson Court in harsh white, turning dawn into something sterile. 2 cruisers blocked the cul-de-sac, red-blue lights flashing against brick facades. EMTs moved with quiet urgency. Deputies handled evidence. But then, chaos. A single voice pierced the order like a blade. Veronica Hale had escaped her zip ties. How, Connor wasn't sure. Maybe a splintered frame, maybe luck. One deputy shouted, "Hey, stop!" and Veronica bolted up the basement steps, nightdress fluttering like a torn flag. Now, barefoot in the front yard, hair tangled, cheeks streaked with dirt and tears, she held a steak knife in one hand. "He's mine!" she shrieked, eyes locked on Connor, who was guiding Leo toward the ambulance. "You don't get to take him. He chose me." Deputies edged closer. "Ma'am, put the knife down," Ruiz said gently. "Lies," Veronica spat. "Paperwork doesn't make you his mother." Then she lunged. Asher moved first. The shepherd launched a blur of fur and muscle, not to bite, but to strike. He collided with Veronica's chest, knocking the air from her lungs. The knife spun away, landing in a flower bed. She hit the ground hard, and Asher pinned her, teeth bared inches from her cheek. She screamed in rage, not fear. Connor arrived seconds later, kicking. "Asked to leave," Connor replied. "He doesn't know what he needs," she sobbed. "I gave him better stories." "You took his only story and tried to burn it." Connor finished the ties. Ruiz stepped in with steel cuffs and Miranda rights. Veronica sagged. Resistance gone. Leo watched from the ambulance doors, mylar blanket around his shoulders. His eyes followed Asher, who returned calmly to his side. Only then did the boy relax, tension leaking from his body like air from a punctured tire. Veronica was lifted into a cruiser, screaming, muted now. Glass separating her from the world. A strange silence settled over the lawn. Connor knelt beside Leo. "It's over," he said. Leo's voice was hoarse. "Will she be okay?" Connor hesitated. "She'll get help, and we'll watch over you now." A sergeant approached. "Briggs, right? Your footage and statement were logged. CPS is 10 minutes out. His mom's 40. He softened. "We'll keep him secure." Connor looked at Leo, who was gripping Asher's fur. "He stays with the dog," Connor said. "Non-negotiable." "Fine by me," the sergeant replied. "That animal's worth 10 deputies. Rain arrived just after sunrise. Unexpected, absolute. Officers ducked into jackets, EMTs covered gurneys, and water turned dust into clay. Connor stood under the open ambulance hatch. Inside, Leo sat quietly. Asher, a calm presence at his feet. Every few seconds, the boy reached down to touch the dog's fur. Reality check. Still safe. Deputy Ruiz ran up. "ETA on the mom, 10 seconds. A black SUV skidded to a halt. Mara Whitmore climbed out without hesitation, rain drenching her hair and coat. "Leo," she called, voice cracking. Leo's head snapped up. Then he ran. The blanket dropped. His bare feet slapped pavement. Mara dropped her purse and met him halfway. They collided, collapsed into each other. She cradled him, kissed his forehead, repeated his name like a lifeline. Leo sobbed, years of silence broken. Officers looked away. Some moments are sacred. Connor stood nearby, silent. Asher joined them, sitting beside mother and son. Leo reached for the dog without looking. One hand on Mara, one on Asher, like tying the past to the future. Mara met Connor's eyes through rain. "Thank you," she mouthed. He nodded. No words, no medals. Just this. Two people breathing in a space they had once been denied. "Ma'am," Ruiz said gently, "the ambulance is warm." Mara hesitated. He stays with me? All fur." Connor nodded, too moved to speak. The doors closed. Red tail lights vanished into the rain. Ruiz stood beside him. "Hell of a night," Connor exhaled. "Hell of a beginning." They watched the ambulance disappear. Birds started singing. And for the first time in too long, Connor believed, maybe, just maybe, the day would hold more healing than hurt. Hospital. Just after dawn. Hallway lights hummed softly. Machines quieted. In a private exam room, Leo sat wrapped in a blanket, patterned with rockets. His hair was damp, skin pale but calm. At his feet, Asher lay motionless, paws crossed like a sphinx. The dog's ears flicked at every hallway murmur, but his eyes never left the boy. Connor stood near the window, arms crossed, untouched coffee steaming on the sill. Rain whispered against the glass. Dr. Ames glanced over a clipboard. "Vitals stable, some bruising, mild dehydration. We'll run labs, but he's okay." Mara nodded, overcome. She gently brushed Leo's hair, fingers lingering on the small crescent birthmark by his ear. The doctor's gaze shifted. "And the dog?" "Certified," Connor said. "He stays." Dr. Ames nodded and left them in a hush of breathing hearts. Mara perched beside Leo. "Pancakes soon, with syrup." Leo looked to Connor for confirmation. Connor nodded. "Chocolate chip pancakes. Doctor's orders." Leo smiled. Small, but real. Outside, rain deepened. Thunder rolled gently in the distance. Connor stepped out to talk with detectives. Inside, Mara held Leo, his head slowly dropping into her lap. One hand in his mother's coat, the other in Asher's fur. For the first time in days, he slept. Mara whispered to the dog, "Thank you." Asher didn't move. He didn't need to. Connor returned minutes later, soaked and silent. Mara pressed a finger to her lips. Leo still slept. Connor resumed his post, finally sipping the coffee. He looked at Asher, still stone still, still watching. And Connor realized something. Some oaths never retire. They just find new battlegrounds. Rain lightened. A sunbeam broke through the clouds, casting prisms on Leo's blanket, Mara's hands, and Asher's fur. Still, the shepherd did not stir. Because for some, the watch never truly ends. Morning in the Willamette Valley unfolded gently, whispered, codename still sacred between them. The dog parked beside him, curious about breakfast, reverent about presence. Mara stood by the counter, coffee in hand. Less haunted now, she watched her son hum while coloring, shoulders relaxed, toes curled on the rung. A letter hung on the fridge, penned in Leo's uncertain hand. "Thank you for letting Milo find me. Love, Leo." Below it, a reply. "Anytime, kid." Connor's handwriting, green marker. Right on cue, Connor entered. Mail in one hand, bakery bag in the other. "Mail call," he greeted, voice low from road dust. Leo perked up. "Blueberries are extinct," he said solemnly. "Good thing I brought reinforcements," Connor said, revealing blueberry scones. Asher was awarded a piece for dignity. Mara poured coffee. "Traffic bad?" "Salem, slow down," he shrugged. Connor leaned in, nodding at Leo's drawing. "What's today's masterpiece?" Leo held it up, a forest scene, a black and sable dog, a boy in cobalt. Between them, an orange leash glowed like flame. He printed carefully, "My guardian Asher, and me." No one spoke for a beat. "Fridge?" Leo asked. Mara nodded too fast, eyes shining. She taped the picture beside Connor's letter. Leo whispered to Asher and hugged him tight. 1 month ago, those arms bore bruises. Now they carried crayon dust and sunlight. "Therapy at 10, Connor said. Leo groaned. "We'll stop for milkshakes after," Connor offered. "Can Asher come?" "He drives better than you," Connor replied. Leo laughed, delighted. Mara leaned on Connor's arm. "Thank you," she whispered, "for more than just the scones." Connor only nodded, eyes on the fridge, where drawings and promises lived side by side. Outside, clouds parted. Growth had already begun, in quiet routines, in dogs who listened harder than people, in a boy who signed his own story. Dr. Vivian Lynn believed in soft rooms, no fluorescent lights, no rigid chairs, just sage walls, river-stone fountains, and art supplies that waited without pressure. Leo liked the sound of the fountain best, rain that doesn't shout. Today, he curled on a beanbag while Asher lounged nearby. Dr. Lynn sat on a cushion, sketch pad open. "Graphite or pastel?" she offered. Leo chose charcoal. He began to draw, a tree line, a moon, and 2 silhouettes, a dog and a child standing at the forest's edge. He made the path wider than before. Dr. Lynn observed. "What's different today?" Leo didn't answer. He smudged softly. "And now?" Leo touched the charcoal line connecting dog and boy. "Now I draw." "Does drawing make a sound?" Leo tapped his chest. "Inside, here." He leaned into Asher. He still listens. And we will too, Dr. Lin promised. Then Leo did something new. He handed her the pencil. Your turn. She added 2 figures, herself kneeling, Mara with a heart on her chest. Leo shaded Asher darker, more defined, and added Connor. Then he set the pencil down. That's everyone. From the doorway, Mara stepped forward, kneeling to hug them all. The best team, she said. Outside, rain eased. Inside, healing came in whispers. Saturday, 9:01 a.m. Leo waited by the screen door, bare feet flexing on oak floors. He could hear the Chevy pickup before it appeared, the belt whir, left fender rattle. Connor Briggs never arrived early, never late. Hot cakes in 3, Mara called from the kitchen, batter bowl in one hand, spatula like a wand in the other. At the curb, the truck idled. Asher leapt up, silent, alert, and bounded out the door. Connor met him at the bottom of the steps, kneeling into a quiet forehead press. No words needed. Leo joined moments later, barefoot and smiling. Grass feels better, he declared. Inside, pancakes steamed, yogurt waited in Asher's bowl. They ate mostly in silence, Mara watching, Connor sipping coffee, Leo dividing banana slices evenly. The framed forest drawing hung on the wall now. A jar of daisies sat on the sill. Peace was not dramatic, it seeped in gently. After breakfast, Mara slipped away for a foundation call. Connor and Leo moved to the back deck, Asher in step. The trees shimmered new leaves. Wind played soft chimes. Leo asked, "Do you think the trees remember me?" "Trees remember everything," Connor said. "They know your laugh by now." "They know Asher, too." "Hard to forget him." Quiet followed, comfortable now. Dr. Lin called it co-regulation, healing through shared calm. No therapy technique could match stillness freely offered. Leo asked without looking, "You'll come next Saturday?" "Every Saturday," Connor promised. 9 sharp. Leo smiled, tracing Asher's collar. Connor rested his arm on his knee. This battleground didn't require armor, just rhythm, patience, and the courage to be gentle. At 10:12 they headed for the creek. Leo darted ahead, Asher bounding behind. Shadows stretched long. The screen door creaked. Leo stepped onto the porch barefoot, sleeves of a navy sweater twice cuffed. In his hands, a single folded paper, creased and smoothed from worry. Asher flanked him, silent escort. Connor looked up. "Hey, champ, truck's almost back in action." Leo approached, clutching the paper like it could blow away. "I have something." He held it out with both hands. Ceremony, not hesitation. Connor unfolded the note carefully. Uneven print, brave across college-ruled lines. "Uncle Troy and Asher, thank you for finding me in the dark. Thank you for hearing the quiet. I'm not afraid at night anymore, not even in dreams. Love, Leo." Beneath it, a pencil sketch. Asher lying across a doorway, guarding an open portal to starlight. A child stepped out, toward it. Connor's throat tightened. "That's the bravest letter I've ever read." Leo glanced at him. "Dr. Lin says writing puts feelings somewhere safe. Is it okay?" Connor knelt. "It's perfect. You opened the door." Leo whispered, "He guarded it until I could." Connor folded the letter, slipping it into his inside jacket pocket, heart adjacent. "This stays with me, Closest place to safe I've got." Leo smiled, a quiet bloom. "Mom says we can frame another for the hallway." "We will," Connor promised. Right beside the forest drawing. Above them, cedar needles rattled in wind. Leo shivered. "How about hot cocoa?" Connor offered, "with the tiny marshmallows? Only way to drink it." Inside, the house glowed with amber light. Mara, sorting grant papers at the kitchen island, glanced up, saw the pride on Leo's face, the emotion on Connor's, and understood without asking. She reached for the cocoa tin. They sat on the living room sofa, cocoa mugs in hand. Leo between Connor and Asher, feet tucked beneath him. The TV stayed off. Conversation ambled. A Marine buddy once melted M&Ms in field coffee. Leo's awe, Mara's soft laughter. Rain began, October's familiar hush. Leo leaned into Connor's side, eyelids heavy. Asher shifted closer, a warm shield of fur. Mara draped a blanket over them. "Bed soon," she whispered. "Not afraid in dreams," Leo murmured. Connor touched his shoulder. "I know." Later, as rain tapped windows and fireplace coals blinked amber, Connor sat with Mara on the couch's edge. Leo slept between them, hand still resting in Asher's fur. Connor thought of the letter now pressed to his chest, a heartbeat written in ink and courage, with a single chipped sheriff star magnet from a long-ago MRE. He pulled Leo's letter from his inside pocket, still folded along softened creases. "I'm not afraid at night anymore." He read the line again, pulse tightening. Gently he opened the magnet and pinned the letter to the fridge, just above a faded photo of his squad in desert camo. In the front row sat a younger Asher, eyes alert, muzzle still soft. The past and the present now layered. One dog, two wars, same unwavering gaze. Connor traced the photo. Shadow, they'd called him then. He'd carried tourniquets through shrapnel, stitched sanity with loyalty. Now he guarded a child's dreams instead of perimeters. The oath hadn't ended. It had evolved. Wind whispered under the back door. The letter fluttered. Connor smoothed it gently. A tuck-in gesture. He boiled water for instant coffee. While it steeped, he remembered the patrol from the photo, how two men never made it past that day. Asher, Shadow, had outlived them, carried scars silently. Now the battles were basement-shaped, and still the dog stood watch. Coffee in hand, Connor settled by the couch. Asher lifted his head, met his gaze. Connor rubbed his ears. "Guardianship's bigger than battle space," he murmured. The dog's tail thumped once. "Took you long enough," it seemed to say. Connor snapped a photo of the fridge and texted it to Mara. "Hung this where I keep my reminders to breathe." She replied, "Perfect." He asked if it was safe there. I told him the fridge has a sentinel star. Connor grinned. He glanced again at the letter, now still. The war in Leo's dreams was over. Maybe Connor's might ease too. Not vanish, but quiet. Fewer midnight porch sweeps. Fewer ghosts. He scratched Asher's chest. "We did all right." The dog rolled, offering his belly dignified surrender. Connor let himself rest too. That night settled over Dry Hollow. Without thunder or drama, just dimming porch lights and wind dancing dry leaves across asphalt. Connor lit the gas fireplace at 7, an old habit from desert winters where flame meant company. He dropped into the leather armchair, wool socks absorbing floor chill. Asher entered, gait slower now, hips stiff, but presence unchanged. He curled near the hearth, not in sentinel coil, but fully relaxed. Deep sleep claimed him. Connor watched, chest. Of course they did. Of course the dog did. Of course he did. He closed his eyes. Images drifted. Shadow in camo. Leo whispering in the dark. Saturday pancakes and sleepy cocoa warmth. The war hadn't vanished. It never would, but it had shifted. Held now by drawings and dog fur and fridge magnets. He placed the drawing back in the tin, carried the star magnet to the fridge. There, he pinned it beside the letter and photo. Layers of loyalty, layers of peace. In the quiet, firelight danced across pine floors. Asher twitched in dreams. Connor sat back, the room exhaling around him. "Good night, kid," he whispered. Only the dog heard, only the fridge, and maybe the letter. But they heard enough. Together, they held the line until morning. The ballroom of Portland's riverfront hall had never felt this alive. Morning sun poured through two-story windows, scattering across rows of reclaimed wood chairs, and catching on crystal water glasses, set like constellations on linen-draped tables. Floral centerpieces, wild asters, Oregon grape, and sprigs of fir leaned toward a podium at the front, where a banner read, "Guardian's Path," in deep forest green. Beneath the title, smaller script explained the mission, pairing rescue dogs with children, healing from trauma. Connor adjusted the knot of his tie, an obligation Mara had insisted on, and scanned the gathering crowd. Philanthropists in tailored jackets, shelter coordinators in logo polos, trauma therapists, off-duty officers who'd volunteered security. In a far corner, 4 kennels lined the wall, each draped with quilt squares sewn by local school kids. Faint whines and excited tail thumps fluttered the fabric. The dogs were the real guests of honor. Leo stood near one of the kennels, hair neatly combed, wearing a navy vest Mara had bought for the occasion. He spoke quietly to the pup inside, an amber-eyed German Shepherd mix with an oversized right ear that refused to stand straight. The puppy licked the bars, tail whacking the cedar chip bedding. When Leo laughed, its rhythm carried across the room like wind chimes, pulling Connor's gaze the way a compass finds north. Mara approached the podium, clipboard in hand. She'd swapped grief-worn black for deep emerald, matching the banner behind her. A hush settled as she adjusted the mic. Cameras from 2 local news stations rolled, reporters perched on folding chairs, pens poised. "Thank you for coming," Mara began, voice steady but laced with the electricity of purpose. "1 year ago, my world narrowed to a single question. Where is my son? Today, Leo is here, thriving, because of 2 guardians, one on 2 legs, one on 4. Guardian's Path will harness that miracle, systematize it, so no child waits in silence again. Each grant finances the training of a shelter dog, pairing it with a trauma-impacted child under the guidance of certified handlers and therapists." She gestured to the kennels. "Our first 4 candidates are here from Rainy Day Rescue, ready for new names, new jobs, and new lives." She beckoned Leo forward. Cameras clicked as he shuffled to her side, cheeks pink but determined. Mara knelt, whispered something. Leo nodded, then faced the audience, clutching a note card with slightly crumpled edges. His voice, though soft, carried through the hushed hall. "I got lost," he began, words measured, "and Asher found me. When I was scared, he listened. Now other kids can have dogs who listen. He turned to the first kennel, lifted the quilt flap. The shepherd mix yipped. Leo announced, "This is Ash. Like Asher, but shorter, so he can grow into a big name." Laughter rippled, gentle and genuine. Leo stroked the pup's muzzle. The dog licked his fingers, earning a chorus of awes. The pup's adoption sponsor, a silver-haired venture capitalist, stood up, pledged funding for handler certification. Applause swelled. Leo rotated to the second kennel, unveiling a brindle mutt with bright golden eyes. "This is Hope," he declared. Another sponsor rose. Cameras flashed. Connor watched, chest tightening, surprised at the sting behind his eyes. He felt Asher lean against his shin, a grounding weight. In that moment he understood. The boy's nightmare had birthed a movement bigger than any single rescue. Guardian's path wasn't charity, it was legacy. Mara straightened, voice clear. "Our goal is 20 pairings in year 1, statewide therapy programs in year 2, and a national model by year 5. Trauma rewires the brain, so does love. Dogs help bridge that rewiring." She paused, scanning faces. "We need donors, trainers, fosters, storytellers. But most of all, we need belief." She motioned to Connor. Reluctantly, he approached the dais, Asher padding beside him. Mara squeezed his arm, then stepped away. Connor faced a sea of expectant eyes, corporate, civic, childlike. He cleared his throat. "When I wore a uniform, I learned extraction tactics. Break in, pull out, make safe. But no mission plan ever covered what comes after safe." He glanced at Leo, who beamed at him from the kennel row. "Turns out the after is the real fight. And dogs," he patted Asher's head, "dogs are better soldiers in that war than any of us." He took a breath, unexpected emotion thickening syllables. "If you're here, you already know statistics, anxiety, attachment disorders, PTSD in children." Erupted, sustained, rising. News crews zoomed in on the shepherd mix, Ash, now pawing the kennel door. Leo giggled, fumbling with the latch, until a handler assisted. The pup bounded out, clumsy paws sliding on polished parquet. It tumbled into Asher, who met the exuberance with patient stillness, as though knighting the youngster into service. Cameras captured the tableau. Retired guardian, new recruit, and the boy who bridged their worlds. Connor crouched, letting Ash sniff his hand. "Carry it forward, little guy," he murmured. Asher gave a soft woof, tail sweeping approval. Mara joined them, eyes glossy. "First of many," she whispered. He nodded. Legacy beats rescue. Rescue ends one nightmare. Legacy stops the next. Leo looked up, grin missing 2 baby teeth. "Ash says thank you." Connor ruffled Leo's hair. "Tell Ash he's welcome, and his job's just starting." The pup yipped assent, launching another round of laughter. Outside Riverfront Hall, the Willamette River glinted under high clouds, current steady toward tomorrow. Inside, signatures met checkbooks, trainers scheduled evaluations, volunteers signed foster forms. Guardian's path had taken its first steps, 4 paws at a time. And somewhere in the commotion, Connor pocketed a program brochure, its cover stamped with a logo Leo had designed, a silhouette of child and dog facing sunrise. He traced the outline with a thumb, felt hope textured beneath glossy ink. Every mission needs a guiding star. They had Asher's eyes, Leo's courage, and now a path broad enough for countless footsteps. The foundation was laid. 3 days after the Guardian's Path launch, Connor Briggs found himself outside a downtown Portland cafe whose chalkboard boasted single origin cold brew and cranberry scones worth repenting for. He wasn't here for pastries. He was here because Mara had forwarded a polite, persistent email from a reporter at the Oregon Chronicle requesting the first-hand account of the Marine who rescued billionaire heiress Mara Whitmore's son. Connor would have ignored it, but Mara thought a refusal delivered face-to-face might discourage future digging. "Civility," she'd whispered, then slipped a blueberry muffin into a paper bag for Asher and shooed him out the door. So Connor had driven into the city, Asher in the passenger seat, seatbelt harness clipped like a seasoned commuter. Now he stood beneath a patio, bright with eagerness. "Your actions in Spokane, heroic. Our readers want to understand the man behind the headline. How did your military training prepare you? What pushed you to intervene when law enforcement hadn't?" Connor listened to rain bead on plastic canvas overhead. He remembered Leo's shaky writing, the letter pinned to his fridge. He pictured Veronica's haunted eyes, Mara's tear-soaked smile, Ash's floppy ear. None of it felt like a headline. He cleared his throat. "I'm not the story you want." Harper's stylus hovered. "With respect, the public disagrees. You orchestrated a rescue." "I reacted," Connor interjected, voice calm but edged. "The boy signaled for help. Any decent human does the same." "Most wouldn't infiltrate a private residence," she countered, leaning forward. "You leveraged specialized skills. There's inspiration in that." Asher shifted, brushing Connor's leg. Connor exhaled slowly. "Miss Keene, there's inspiration in a child who still believed someone would come." He shook his head. "This wasn't my triumph. It was his endurance." Harper softened her tone. "But readers need heroes. They have one." Connor stroked Asher's head. "He's four-legged." She smiled, sympathetic, unconvinced. "Animals make great copy, but people connect to human journeys. Veterans struggling to adapt, choosing service again." Connor's gaze cooled. "Struggle isn't a headline either. It's life, and it belongs to the people living it." Rain intensified, drumming cafe awnings. Harper tucked damp hair behind one ear. If not a full profile, perhaps a quote? Something about second chances? Connor considered. Second chances belonged to Leo, to Ash, to Veronica, in whatever facility was helping her piece reality back together. Finally, he spoke, words measured as range markers. "I appreciate what you do, but the best stories aren't always ours to publish." Harper touched her tablet screen off, sighing. "You realize there'll be other reporters, less courteous." "I can't stop them," he said, "but I won't help them." She slid a business card from her coat pocket. "If you change your mind." He didn't reach for it. "I won't." Harper hesitated, then slipped the card back. She offered a rueful smile. "For what it's worth, declining an interview doesn't erase your impact." "Impact isn't the point," Connor replied. "Continuation is." A puzzled furrow creased her brow. He nodded toward the street, where buses hissed and umbrellas bobbed like black petals. "There's a foundation." Gratitude silent between palms. She turned toward the cafe door, Midway, she glanced back. "Mr. Briggs, why did you really turn me down?" He met her eyes, rain paling the world between them. "It wasn't mine to tell," he said. "It was his." Harper absorbed that, nodded, and disappeared into espresso-scented interior. Connor exhaled, knelt beside Asher, offering the muffin Mara had stashed. The dog accepted, crumbs scattering on wet sidewalk. A toddler in a yellow raincoat toddled past, pointing. "Doggy!" Connor smiled, tipping an invisible cap. He straightened, rain peppering his hair. Some stories asked to be broadcast. Others breathed better in quiet rooms, in drawings on fridges, in letters folded near the heart. Leo's journey belonged to Leo, and to every child Guardian's path would reach. Connor's chapter was footnote at best. He led Asher back to the truck. As they pulled from the curb, windshield wipers batting drizzle, Connor glanced at the passenger seat. Asher watched the road, alert, content. In the rearview mirror, Harper exited the cafe, already typing, likely framing a new angle focused on a foundation, a fearless boy, and a dog whose legacy bore repeating. That, Connor thought, was enough. He merged onto the highway, northbound toward forests, waterfalls, and Saturday visits that never missed 9 o'clock. Traffic thinned, cityscape giving way to evergreen blur. Beside him, Asher settled, head on pause, sighing the sigh of guardians who know their watch continues, even if no one is taking notes. Rain lightened into mist. Road unspooled ahead. Some tales, Connor mused, travel longer than headlines, and the ones that matter keep walking quietly. Night wrapped the Whitmore bungalow in muffled indigo. Beyond the windows, Douglas fir crowns swayed under a waning moon, branches whispering lullabies no one quite recalled learning. Inside, hallway sconces glowed low, just enough light for guardians to navigate without stubbing toes or startling dreams. In Leo's bedroom, the soundtrack was soft breath and the occasional sigh as blankets adjusted themselves around a small, sleep-warm body. The walls, once bare, now displayed watercolor forests, Polaroids of therapy dog sessions, and one magazine clipping announcing Guardian's Path's first statewide grant. Above the headboard hung a framed charcoal drawing, Asher and Leo, standing at a forest edge, path widening into sunrise. Leo slept curled on his side, one arm tucked beneath a cheek, the other looped tight around a plush German Shepherd doll, sized perfectly for 6-year-old embrace. Mara had found it at a local artisan market. Its tiny rhythm a piece earned. The boy's brow, the same brow, once creased in perpetual vigilance, lay smooth beneath moonlit slats of the half-closed blinds. Outside the bedroom, Asher lay lengthwise across the threshold, head resting on outstretched paws, eyes open but untroubled. He faced the hallway, body forming a living barricade between child and world, yet his muscles held no tension. Every so often his nostrils flared, cataloging house night scents, applewood embers settling in the hearth, Mara's lavender hand cream, Connor's wool jacket drying by the back door. Connor sat on the hallway bench a few feet away, bootlaces dangling untied, elbows propped on knees. He watched Asher, then the faint rise and fall of blankets beyond the cracked door. A cup of chamomile cooled in his hands, Mara's prescription for nights after long drives and refused interviews. He hadn't planned to stay this late, but distance felt wasteful when peace was this tangible. Mara padded down the hall in slipper-soft steps, robe cinched, hair loose from its day's knot. She carried a folded quilt. When she reached Connor, she draped the quilt over Asher's haunches. The dog's ear flicked. He did not move. acceptance without surrender. Mara's hand lingered, fingers tracing silvered fur. "Thank you for coming back," she whispered. Connor half smiled, figured you could use help eating the leftover lasagna. She chuckled, then grew quiet, gaze returning to Leo. He laughed in his sleep earlier. First time. Something tightened behind Connor's ribs. That's worth more than headlines. Mara's eyes shone in hallway amber. He's begun planning a treehouse, wants a rope ladder for Asher. Connor raised his cup in salute. "We'll engineer something." They stood in companionable hush. The house creaked, old wood settling like bones exhaling. In the bedroom, Leo murmured, rolled to his back, plush dog perched on his chest like a sentinel kite. Asher's gaze flicked to the shift, ears soft, tail sweeping once, then still. Satisfied, he rested his chin on his front paws. Mara leaned against the wall beside Connor, voice scarcely audible. "Sometimes angels don't need wings," she said, eyes on the shepherd. "They only need to arrive on time." Connor felt the words settle over the hallway like a benediction. He looked down at Asher, scars hidden beneath velvet night, loyalty shining brighter than lamplight. He reached, brushing knuckles along the quilt-covered flank. Arrived right on schedule. Down the hall, the grandfather clock chimed midnight, 3 mellow notes borrowed from some older century. Mara squeezed Connor's shoulder and retreated to her room. He lingered, murmured. Asher's eyes fluttered. Connor scratched behind one ear, feeling the dog's slow heartbeat beneath skin. War's over. Asher's lids drifted closed, exhale puffing the edge of quilt. Connor rose, tiptoed down the hall, switching off sconces until only the faint glow from Leo's nightlight painted the floor in pale gold. In the bedroom, Wing the plush shepherd guarded dreams. At the doorway, Asher dozed, alertness finally conceding to calm. Outside, wind rustled birch leaves, a lullaby in foreign tongue. Inside, peace held. At the front door, Connor slipped on his jacket, keys quiet in palm. He glanced once more down the hall. Dog, plush, child, all exactly where they belonged. He opened the door to cool autumn air. A star blinked between drifting clouds. He thought of the sheriff magnet, Leo's letter, and promises pinned to passing days. He closed the door, soft latch echoing hope rather than fear, knowing guardianship was less about walls and more about timing. Arriving when summoned, listening to the quiet, staying until breath steadied. Under the watchful gaze of moon and maple, Connor crossed the porch, boots whispering on wooden steps. Behind him, the house breathed easy, shielded by a dog without wings, who nevertheless had learned to fly on duty. And somewhere in that hush, a child dreamed, not of basements or names stolen, but of forests, tree houses, and the low, faithful thrum of a heartbeat that promised morning. Sometimes, it's not the words we speak, but the silent presence beside us that brings the most healing. Stories like Leo and Asher's remind us of something simple but profound. Dogs don't just guard our homes, they guard our hearts, especially German shepherds, with their fierce loyalty and gentle wisdom, often sense what we need long before we do. If you've ever looked into your dog's eyes and felt understood, even without saying a word, you already know that bond is something sacred. If you're looking for ways to connect more deeply with your own dog, maybe through better communication, shared routines, or just understanding them on a deeper level. There's a beautiful resource I've come across recently. Nothing fancy, just something kind and thoughtful, created by people who truly get it. I'll leave the link here if you're curious. And if you've made it this far with us, thank you truly. The world feels a little kinder when we share it with those who walk beside us, on 2 legs or 4. Take care of your dog. They've been taking care of you all along.